Right, let's make a start. One or two people still coming through the door, but we're going to make a start. We've got Darren Henley with us. Darren is, of course, Chief Executive of Arts Council England. We've got him for 45 minutes or so. So here's the plan for this morning. Just to remind you, Darren's previously Managing Director of Classic FM, authored two independent government reviews into music education and cultural education in England, certified coach, holds a doctorate exploring the role of the outsider as an agent for change, degrees in positive psychology, history of art, management, and politics, and his book, which is this one here. It's going to be blurred for you, but believe you me, it's right here. The Arts Dividend: How Investment in Culture Creates Happier Lives, champions happiness as a public policy goal, showing how people and places across England can thrive thanks to the positive impacts of public investment in artists, arts organisations, museums, and libraries, which I suspect everybody on this call has a connection to in one shape or another. So we record these calls so people can watch them again, and people who can't make it on a Friday morning can watch them. And the plan for this morning is Kate's going to say a few words just to introduce the network. I'm going to talk to Darren for about 20 minutes or so, perhaps 25 minutes. And then we'll have about 20 minutes for questions from the floor towards the end. And Darren's got to go about 10. So that's where we're at with it as far as we are concerned. Darren, I last saw you, by the way, at the Carlisle Youth Zone in January last year when you were on one of your 3 or 4 day trips to Cumbria. And this is a photograph of us. This is the podcast episode landing site on the Cumbria Arts and Culture Network. And there's some fantastic graffiti. If you've not been to the Carlisle Youth Zone, there's fantastic sort of graffiti on the walls. And it was a gathering there. So that's when we did that. And I made a podcast episode out of that interview back in January last year. Thank you, Amy, for sharing that. Before we come to Darren, and you're very welcome, Darren, to be with us this morning. And thank you for joining us. Kate, would you like to say a few words as our director about the network? And perhaps for people that sometimes don't join this call as well, so you can explain what the Friday calls were about too.
Yeah, okay. Well, hello everybody. It's great to see so many folk. Just, I guess, a quick refresh really. CACN, Cumbria Arts and Culture Network. What we do and why we exist. We are put on the earth to connect and champion and develop and empower the culture sector in Cumbria. We've been going since 2018. When we started, it was just a very small, informal network of the larger cultural organisations, the NPOs mostly, national portfolio organisations in Cumbria. And then since then, we've kind of grown and grown and grown. And in particular, we took off during COVID when, in fact, just before we realised that it would be really helpful to meet online and that would help us get over some of the challenges of bringing people together in Cumbria. So we have been meeting every Friday like this online, I think for about 220 Fridays now. Here we all are. We keep wondering whether it's something we should stop doing, but there doesn't seem to be any point in stopping doing something that functions so effectively. And we like to think it's the sort of beating heart of the network. Other things we do, as Tom's already says, we do the podcast, we run all sorts of training sessions, mentoring, fundraising hubs, website with its whole range of different pages. For example, the opportunities page, you can sign up, create yourself a little profile on there. We work really closely with both Westmoreland and Furness Council and Cumberland Council, and we support both councils in one way, shape or form in terms of developing the sector. Effectively, I like to think that we are here to hold the space to help people collaborate, to help people get to know each other. And what we've found over the years is that the more people just get to know each other, the more likely they are to collaborate. And that's when good things start to happen. And we try to collaborate too. So just by way of example, we are developing more and more of the focus on young people and supporting young people who we know struggle to develop creative careers in this part of the world. One of the things that we're doing very soon is a collaboration with Young Sounds, which is a nationwide organisation that helps young people break into music careers, Cumbria Music Hub and Brewery Arts, and we're putting on two music congresses that are designed to help young people find out more about what it's actually like to work in the music industry. The other example of collaboration we were just talking about a moment ago is Curated Cumbria, which is the new newsletter that we've created with Intro, a PR agency in Carlisle, designed to do exactly what we're here for, which is to champion all the amazing stuff that goes on across Cumbria. Because even though we are in some ways in the furthest flung parts of this country, doesn't mean to say there isn't a lot of amazing work going on, and yet it is quite easy to miss. So the idea of Curated Cumbria is that it brings all those events together, and it's really easy to find out what's happening. So look out for that. Anyway, that is what we do, and yeah, long may it last. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Right, without further ado, here's the book. I've taken my blow off specially so you can see it, that Darren has published this year. Darren, tell us a bit about the book, first of all, and why it's a revision, I think, of a book that you wrote about 10 years ago originally. Tell us about the book and why you wanted to write it and republish it.
Good morning. Thank you for your time. And great to see everybody. And I'm sorry to not be actually with you in Cumbria talking to you, but it's great to connect up. I mean, this is a book really that I believe really passionately that what we do at the Arts Council is to take taxpayers' money and National Lottery players' money, and we invest it in organisations and individuals right across the country. And why do we do that? We do that because it creates happier lives, I think, in the end. So if you've had that thing of having 3 words, I think what we do is create happier lives. We make people's lives better. And what I wanted to do was to make sure we tell the story of the whole of our country. You know, sometimes I look at the national media, and there's a great London centricity to that. Since I've been doing this job, I've been doing it for 10 years now. I believe really passionately that we're there for everybody in every part of the country, and I want to make sure that 2 things happen. One, that individual creatives and creative organizations can have their creativity come to the fore, so we invest in that in their place, but also we make sure that for places right across the country they're getting to see the best work that's coming into there, and there's really high quality professional work happening you know, close to where they live. And I realize there are challenges sometimes on scale and infrastructure, but that doesn't mean we should give up and not do it. So for me, this is about saying I've had this, you know, non-stop journey around the country. I've met some amazing people. I've seen some amazing work. I've talked to a lot of audiences, and I really believe we do this for the audiences and for the participants and for the visitors. And it's in their service that we're investing this money. And I just wanted to be able to tell that story, and also the possibilities of what for, you know, the next generation of creative talent, for our young people, investment in cultural education and skills have for them, and also making sure that happens close to where they live as well. So there's loads of stuff in there about the story we can tell ourselves of a nation internationally, about what it does for us as individuals, and what it does for our villages and towns and cities across the country.
Okay, I'm going to challenge you back on that in a second, if I may. But just to say, there's a lovely section, a little Cumbrian section in here. When you come to Cumbria, and the University of Cumbria is name checked, you have a good time in Barrow going to the opening of the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra project there, Arts Council back project there back in 2024. And they're also here in Cockermouth, where I am, a nice piece about the Kirkgate and the role that the Kirkgate has to play in particularly a rural place like Cumbria. But, you know, I guess my challenge to you is, you know, you wrote this 10 years ago. Why hasn't the message got through yet to people that I'm assuming you're writing this to and for? Why do they still need to be convinced that there is an arts dividend? Why hasn't that message got through yet?
I think it's a really good question, and it's something I remember talking. You know, I did your role on stage with John Tuser. Actually, he published a book, and I asked him exactly the same question, and he had a very good answer, which is that, you know, the world changes, and we always have to make sure that we remain relevant to it. And different people, different parties of power, and I think a lot of people do understand the value. But, you know, we look at the economics of the world at any given time, and we continue to have to make that case. And I suppose also, the artistic and cultural world changes all the time, so every iteration needs to, if you like, prove the point. I believe very passionately that the case has been made, but I don't control all the purse strings and all the investment in the country. So my job is to continue to say there are so many great artists and so many great arts organizations and cultural organizations that we work with that are fundable propositions. You know, the possibility of the work that they do is incredibly high quality. It's incredibly relevant to audiences. It's innovative. It's taking their art forms or their curatorial practice on. And we are probably at a stage at the moment where we turn down more than we ever have done in the past. So I want to say, by showing the case that we can make, by showing how we're absolutely relevant to a developing 21st century world, if we had more money, we could fund more and we could do more. And I suppose it's trying to reassure those people who are making those decisions about overall budgets for things, that actually this will be money well spent and it will change places. And I think that's, so I will always continue to make the case. And I think, even if funding doubled tomorrow, we would still be making the case, because with more, we could do more.
Okay. It's about £500 million a year that you dish out. Is that a fair figure?
Yes, so we have about it's probably a bit more than that, but have about £500 million from government, and then about 260 million from the National Lottery as well. So tonight there is obviously a National Lottery 208 million Euro Millions jackpot. If you buy a ticket, you are helping fund the arts and the heritage and sport and film and communities across the country. The National Lottery is an amazing driver of things that are good in our country, and actually by buying a ticket, and in weeks where there's a big Euro Millions rollover, we just get more revenue. We have more money then to invest in artists and cultural organisations. It's an absolute genuine thing, and make sure it's the National Lottery.
Do you buy a ticket?
I buy a ticket for every lottery draw.
Do you? Okay. Have you ever won?
Well, about £2.70. I think I did win about 96 quid once.
Okay. Congratulations. Let's bring you to Cumbria. What do you feel when you visit the arts in Cumbria? What do you walk away, or what do you go back on the train down south thinking?
I always think that Cumbria is, in my head, I have Cumbria as a sort of naturally creative place. I think because it's such a beautiful landscape and you've got so much natural beauty there. I think if I lived or worked or studied in Cumbria, that must rub off on you. And I see how many artists and how many people want to set their creative practice in Cumbria, and I think that's what's exciting. You can sort of drink in the landscape and then be creative on the back of that. But at the same time, I think there are obviously challenges as well, not because of any problems with the place or the infrastructure. It's just it's a big landmass with lots of people living in lots of places, and I think that must be challenging. You're right. I'm full of admiration for the University of Cumbria. When you look at if you're the vice chancellor of the University of Cumbria and you're going to see all your campuses, it's quite a long journey to drive around and do that every day. So I'm very conscious that for those people who have responsibilities over a wide area, that can be challenging. But technology, as you said right at the start of this, you're using technology to challenge some of that. But I think we do know that human interaction is the best thing in actually being in the same room and seeing things. So, I think there's some challenges there, but the work that comes out of Cumbria is fantastic. It's really interesting. You mentioned the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic going to Barrow, and I talk to them regularly, and they absolutely love being in Barrow. It's really, really interesting. The musicians, the performers, they love it. There's a real sense of something that's a special relationship there that's growing. And one of the things we did at our last national portfolio round was we invested specifically some extra money into Liverpool Phil to do that Barrow role. So I think that's really interesting to see how, and I think they've done it in a brilliant way, where they've not been an orchestra from somewhere else parachuting in. It's been done very much in a sense of partnership, and very much with a respect also for the existing organisations who are there 365 days of the year. And I think it's additive and not subtractive, and I think that's a really positive thing.
Okay, but I guess just to kind of push back on the Cumbria angle a bit more, so just this week we had all the government's public transport announcements, lauding all this money going into the north of England. Cumbria got not a penny of that. How does Cumbria not get lost in the northern argument as much as the national argument?
Well, transport's above my pay grade, so but I absolutely recognise the importance of transport.
But there's a parallel there, isn't there, about arts investment as well?
Yeah,
perhaps.
no, I understand that, and I suppose I do hear. We mentioned Barrow, but I really do, on a national basis, hear the Barrows, because my ears prick up every time I hear it mentioned. I hear the Barrow story being told very loudly by national government at the moment, and the investment there, some of the defence investment and things like that, and then the infrastructure investment that needs to follow on from that. I think that I see, I see Cumbria as a distinct place, and I think that's important. I think it is important that you do argue for it not to be lost in a larger northern argument. And I think also it's understanding that different parts of different places are different. You know, some of them will be big conurbations, some of them will be very rural, and actually it's understanding the texture there. So one of the things at the Arts Council that we try to do is to have meaningful relationships with people on the ground in local government, and they will all be different, and there will be different needs at different times for different places. And I think the danger can be, and this is why I really don't believe that we think about in the way we think. I don't believe we think like a London-centric organisation. 80% of my colleagues are actually based outside of London, and our headquarters is in Manchester. So we are a national organisation. We try to be as national as possible, and so decision making is also made much closer to where people live and work than all sitting in one office somewhere in the country telling everyone what they ought to have. So I think it is important that we understand localities, and we try our best as a national funder to invest in a way that is going to connect with audiences and people in those localities. And I don't think we don't always get it right, and we learn and we do things differently and we iterate, and that's important. But I will always bang the drum for individual places. One of the things I always say to places is, for us as a strategic national investor, it's really helpful if we know what you want to be famous for. Because we haven't got enough money to give everybody everything everywhere. But if we know what you want to be famous for, we can start to strategically overinvest in that thing to help that go on that journey together. It's not my job or indeed my skill to tell you what you ought to have, because you live in Cumbria, you know what you should have, and it's not something for someone from outside to tell you.
Okay, so what do we want to be famous for? Can I push ahead to next week now? And on June the 11th, I think it is, a spending review takes place. What would be a good outcome for the arts in England from the spending review?
Well, I would say that I'm really greedy for more public investment in all of our arts and all of our culture sector. And the reason I'm greedy for that is I know that money can be spent to make a difference in the lives of people who live up and down the country. So, we hope for growth, but at the same time, it's been very clear, government has been very, very clear that this is a very, very tough spending round, and there is not, huge amounts of public money available. So, we have made the case repeatedly and compellingly, I hope, but we wait and see. There will be a decision as to how much funding goes to Department of Culture, Media and Sport, and then that will be divided out among the various responsibilities of DCMS. So we wait and see.
Okay, so would a sort of stand firm figure be a good outcome?
Well, I would always argue for growth. So
Okay.
I will always argue for growth, but I am also realistic to know that government is not signaling that non-protected departments have got large buckets of cash coming their way. So, but I will always argue for growth, and we'll always make the case for growth, as I say, because there's just so much good that we could invest in that will make such a positive difference to people's lives. And I think we want to invest in artists and cultural organizations for the sake of artists and cultural organizations and the creative work they make and the brilliant work they do, their innovation, the way they take their art forms on, or they curate museums or work in libraries in different ways. And we do that not in service of ourselves as a sector, but we do that because it's connecting with audiences and it's changing people's lives for the better, because they have horizons open to them. They are able to interact and learn and see things that are beyond the world that they would live in otherwise. And I think so we can make all that. We know that cultural organizations and artists can animate villages, towns and cities and change them as places. We know that for young people, if they have cultural lives, rich cultural lives, they can develop skills either as artists or performers or cultural practitioners, or indeed in doing anything else. Having that creativity within their education is really important. And we know also that there is an economic argument. And one of the things at the moment the government obviously is very, very focused on is about growth. And I've talked a lot recently about how actually investing in our cultural organizations, investing in artists, there is an economic benefit there as well. And it's important, I think, that we acknowledge that. It's not maybe always the primary reason we do things, because we want to create great culture and great art. But if we need to tell that story about the economic growth, then we will do that, again, because that's where I would say more investment, more public investment in the arts will drive that forward, and it's not something that's a nice to have on the edge. It's actually absolutely central to our narrative as a nation.
Yeah, I just that piece that you wrote in the Stage this week, I read last night, and you talked about getting us the arts sector getting more comfortable with the language of growth, because it's the language of creativity and innovation. Growth is a bit of a dirty word for some people, but what you're saying is we should embrace it because it's someone else's agenda.
Yeah, I mean, for me, what I talked about there was saying, in the end, when you look at what great creative people do, is they have ideas, and and all of that is you have an idea and you bring it to life in some way. So whether that be a performance, or you're putting an exhibition on in a museum, you're doing work in a library, all of those things start with an idea, the spark of an idea, and that's the creativity. And then those ideas grow, and then there's a ripple effect around it. There's all sorts of benefits that come from that idea. And I think, we talk a lot in this country about R&D, and I sometimes think that the role of R&D in the arts world is not always understood. I mean, there's everyone here around the table who creates artistic work. Well, no, there's R&D. Whether you're a visual artist or a writer or a performer, there's R&D in that. You test it, you learn, you make it a bit better. Sometimes you do R&D in front of an audience. Sometimes you do it in a closed room, and that's a really important part of the process. It's just the same with engineering or science, and I think it's sometimes forgotten how much of also the publicly invested world connects over into our very commercial creative industries, and how much of the training and the development is done because of public money that may then go on and be very, very cash generative for the more commercial part of the creative industries. And let's face it, in areas like music and film and theatre and literature, we are up there for a relatively small island, doing extremely well around the world.
Okay, one more from me, and then I'm going to hand it open to the floor. And I'd invite you to either use your electronic hand to put it up, or just put your hand up like that, and I'll be able to see that on your screen. But just go back to Let's Create. It had a difficult birth, Let's Create, because it was the pandemic, if my memory serves me correctly, when it was launched back in the spring of 2020. One or two people have challenged Let's Create and the strategy. Are you still loyal to Let's Create? That, just for those that don't know, this is the overriding Arts Council 10-year strategy with 4 principles, investment principles that I'm sure lots of people will be familiar with. But do you still stand by that, Darren?
Yeah, absolutely. So Let's Create, the two things we're really, really keen to do. Everybody in this country's creativity should be able to come to the fore, and we want to take high quality professional work close to where people live on their doorsteps, and they're the two sort of overarching principles of it. And it's there to say it's a 10-year journey through till 2030, so we're at the halfway point now, and we wanted to make sure that we also invested across the country in a fair way, or a fairer way. Fairness and opportunity are absolutely at the heart. We wanted to make sure everybody from all backgrounds and communities and walks of life, their stories could come to the fore. And we were really, really keen to make sure that, we cherish having amazing national and international cultural institutions, and so many of those will be in London as our capital city, and that's really, really important. But England does not end at the M25, and there's a lot of people who live their lives outside of the M25, and they deserve to have rich cultural lives as well. So, that always when you have a finite amount of money, the Arts Council will be making decisions. Some people will agree with those decisions, some people not so much. I mean, I think when I think about what I do, if I try and analyze my job a little bit, I spend every day talking to people who are really, really passionate about something. They're either passionate about a particular art form or a particular geography, sometimes one performing company within an art form. Sometimes they really don't like one sort of art and they love another sort of art. And what we've got to do is try and make sure we stand back and we invest in all of those opportunities for everybody, so we're not just going down one pathway. And art changes, culture changes, the way it's delivered changes, art form changes, so we need to make the people doing it change, the audience for it change, and we need to make sure we're in service of all of those. So Let's Create enables us to do that. It's absolutely central. And Let's Create is not the outcome. Let's Create is the tool by which we invest in the great artists and the great cultural organizations in this country to deliver for audiences. And we wrote Let's Create, people sometimes forget, not as a group of Arts Council people sitting in a room in London, and just presented it. We went out for 2 years and we talked to audiences across the country. And this is the big change: is instead of just thinking about ourselves as practitioners and looking inwards, we talk to the audiences, people who have existing relationships with organizations and individuals we fund, but also people who don't. And that was really understanding about their cultural lives and how we could make sure we were taking taxpayers' money and National Lottery players' money, so it's their money we're investing, in service of them, rather than actually not serving as many as we might have done.
Okay, going to go to some questions. There's some questions in chat, but again, please put your hand up if you want to come off mute and ask a question yourself. So, Darren, in no particular order, Charlotte asks, Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell in their podcast this week echoed their long-time complaint that the UK is very poor at blowing our trumpet about the UK's worldwide significance in the arts. We have so much international soft power in so many different areas of the arts. Does the Arts Council work on this? Does it chivvy the government to take this more seriously?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely true. I mean, we have amazing soft power and quite hard power as well. I don't know if that's a phrase, but I've just made it up if it isn't. But because I think actually it's very measurable, and it's out there. It makes me, and this is not a party political comment, but any senior government minister or prime minister, when they do international tours, suddenly they want to be there with a ballet company or an opera company or visual artists or filmmakers or writers. It's really interesting how that is something that unlocks doors on in national and international stage. And we work in partnership with the British Council as well, but we also invest internationally to do work, particularly at the moment in some of those countries that were part of the European Union, where we didn't necessarily need to have those conversations before, but where we want to make sure our artists are able to take their work there and we can bring work back. I think it's that international exchange both ways is also really, really valuable. There is a new soft power council, so our Secretary of State Lisa Nandy with David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, have set up a soft power council, and the arts are part of that. But I think for me, when I step back from it, I think in the end, a lot of what we do is we tell stories. I'm really interested in storytelling, whatever the art form, whatever, if you work in museums, if you work in libraries, it's all about stories in the end. And I think this is part of our national story. It can be a local story. It can be a story of an individual. And I think this is where culture and artistic endeavor and creativity come to that. And so for me, it is about that sense of storytelling.
Okay. Jane comments, access to the arts and personal agency for young people depend on good, cheap public transport. We can't think of arts funding in a vacuum. And I know you're not the head of transport either, Darren, but that's an absolutely key observation, particularly in a place like Cumbria.
I think James is absolutely right. I mean, I sometimes say, I sort of sometimes say it flippantly, but increasingly, I wonder if I mean it. If I ran a bus company, I could probably solve many of the problems with the arts sector in this country. I'm painfully
We've got our newsline, everybody. We've got our newsline there.
I'm painfully aware that you can give as many free tickets to a young person if you want, but if the bus doesn't go home after the show and they can't literally physically get home, there's no point in giving the tickets out. It's great if you can arrive at 7 o'clock in the venue, but then it's actually 7 o'clock the following morning before you can go home. I mean, so I think that is very relevant. And one of the things I have observed with some of the new combined authority mayors, the metro mayors around the country, where they have a greater agency over transport in some of their areas, that they're wrestling with that, and in some cases, really actively trying to tackle it. So I think that's a very positive. It's really important we keep telling that story, because we want to make sure that the work that we're investing is not just for everybody who happens to own a car and be able to afford the car parking. That everyone's got to be able to go, whether it by bus or by train. Public transport is absolutely crucial to that.
Okay, that takes us naturally on to the next question, actually, which is from Anna Little, who's the head of Arts and Culture and Heritage for Cumberland Council. Be really interested to hear Darren's thoughts on the opportunities for the sector through devolution.
Yeah, and I think we have really good relationships with local authorities around the country. And one thing I would say is I'm I know how much pressure are on local authorities, whether it be officials or elected members right now, in terms of the budgets that they have and some of the calls on their budgets for statutory responsibilities. Obviously, culture is not a statutory responsibility, and so I'm very, very aware that those local authorities who are making decisions to continue to invest in culture and to support it are making difficult choices, and we will do everything we can to work with them. I mean, I'm always optimistic. I'm not. I know how tough it is if you run a cultural organization or you're an individual freelance artist at the moment. I absolutely understand that, and I'm not in any way minimizing the challenges around that. But at the same time, I want to tell an optimistic story, because I think, again, this is about when we talk to government, when we talk to business sponsors, when we talk to education establishments or local authorities, it's about understanding the massive data that we've all got, and sometimes it's anecdotal, and more increasingly it's now hard data that shows what the public investment in culture, in individual artists, in places can do to change that story. So again, by showing that, I believe we can go on a journey where we can say that there is a logical conclusion for public investors, not just the Arts Council, to say, let's put money into this because it will change places. It's not a nice to have, it's absolutely central to the development of places around the country. And so I think for local authorities, that's something, and there's some great people in local authorities around the country who absolutely get this and really work very hard to partner on it.
Okay. The inevitable Grantium question, Darren. So Pete Hunter asked, the Grantium portal is not very user-friendly. I know that this has been a barrier to many people applying for funding. Are there plans to improve it?
Yes.
When?
So hopefully we'll come back. Hopefully we will talk to people about that this year. So we're working to make it better. I'm not going to say it's perfect or anything at all. So I think I absolutely hear the challenge, and it's one that we want to sort out.
Okay, thank you. Dave Camlin asks, in West Cumbria, the CPP, the Creative People and Places project, has been experienced by the artist community here as somewhat disconnected from existing provision and relationships between artists and communities. I'm interested to know whether this is a common experience across the CPP programme generally. What's the rationale for this approach, and what has Arts Council learned so far about integrating big flagship projects like CPP, I think there's 2 here in Cumbria, into a more complementary role with existing provision and relationships?
Well, CPP programs across the country have tended to go into places where there is a low level of infrastructure that exists, and also sometimes a low level of connection in terms of audiences connecting with publicly funded art. So I think we've got some great data. I mean, one thing that's interesting with CPP is from day one, we wanted to evaluate and understand it because it was a different way of us investing. So co-curation sits very much at the heart of the CPP projects, and that's the ethos of it. And we've learned a lot there actually about working with people on the ground. So the partners are also very different. So again, we deliberately decided not to invest through local authorities, not because we were see previous conversation, but we wanted to do it a different way. And so often bringing partners in from outside the existing arts sector as well. So different CPP programs are at different stages of development, and there's lots of learning and practice, and there's a great peer network there. So I think keep talking to us, keep talking to them.
Okay, Dave, do you want to? You've got another question there. Do you want to come off and ask that question yourself? Come off mute.
Well, no. I mean, I'm just interested to know whether that pattern, whether there are any reflections on that mode of delivery. I mean, I know I absolutely hear what you're saying. There are cultural dark spots around the country, but in those dark spots, there are a lot of artists doing a lot of work, building up relationships with communities over long periods of time. And sometimes one of the things that there's always been a problem in these areas where we work is big projects coming in and ignoring these small fires that already exist and trying to establish something big and shiny. But in doing so, they kind of suck the air out of and suck resources out of what's actually going on the ground. I wonder if that's part of Is that reflected in other experiences? Is that just a West Cumbrian thing, or is that something you're hearing on the ground? And I guess, would you hear about that in your position?
I think I would, because I do a lot of conversations like this, and one of the things that's quite interesting is people are quite rightly and never hopefully never shy. I want to hear what people feel. So I think, and what people say. So it's not something I hear a lot around the country, to be honest with you. But what we need to do is to ensure that the work needs to recognize what exists and hopefully amplify it and grow it. That would be the aim, but also to bring in that balance of new as well. But it shouldn't be either or. I mean, one of the things I'm really interested in about the way that I think we invest, and we should be investing, and the way we all work together is it shouldn't be a series of binary decisions, do one thing or the other. There needs to be. So I absolutely recognize that in any place, in any part of the country, there will be people with strong existing creative practice and strong existing relationships. My question will always be how can they be amplified and grown and built upon, and then how can do new things that are complementary. So I think that will be always my objective with this. But it's always good to raise up challenges, and we should continue to talk about those and think about them.
Okay, thank you, Darren. Thanks, Dave. Simon Morley asks, what would Darren say to artists in Eden in the east of Cumbria who have seen no funding from Arts Council in the last 8 years and see Arts Council as a distant, hard-to-reach organisation that has overly complex systems that are a massive barrier?
Well, we spend time talking to people, so I'm really happy for us to have conversations with artists, and we can do some work. We can come and see you in Eden and talk about it. We are there. We do fund people. We're spending hundreds of millions of pounds every year on investing in organisations. So it is possible to get funding from us. We do exist to make that funding happen. We do have criteria, and we are spending public money. So there are some things that we need people to do, and we do have things that are sort of the general rules of putting public money into places. And I sort of say that because sometimes I can't just write a check. So and I know everybody who applies to us, I'm very conscious, everybody who applies to us absolutely believes that their work is of a high standard and is there. And I'm not arguing with that. We have so many fundable propositions that many really, really good projects don't get money. And I absolutely understand that. That's not because we think the projects are bad or the individuals are not creatively brilliant or at all. It's just we've got too many of the same standard at the moment and not enough money to give out. So, but I'm very, very happy to say that, let's see what me and my colleagues in the Northwest office can do to have those conversations in Eden with potential applicants. And the other thing to say is, I am aware that people will have additional needs. That means sometimes it's hard for them to apply for work for money from us, but we do a lot in access support. In fact, one of the big areas where we've invested quite a lot more money in is to make sure that those people with access challenges are supported in coming through the systems, and we are spending a significant chunk of money every year to make sure that happens, to make sure that whatever the system, for some people, whatever the computer system we have, whether it was granting or something else, it would still be hard for them to make an application. I'm very conscious of that. We want to make sure that we can do everything we can to even out the possibilities then. So we do spend a lot of money making sure we support people with those additional needs.
Okay, thank you. We've got 5 or 6 minutes left, so I'm going to rattle through a few more questions. One from Pete: will AI play a role in arts funding in the future, i.e. initial assessment of applications?
So we've literally just this week issued some guidance on AI, and we aren't looking at AI to make application assessments at the moment at all.
Okay. Bridget asks, can you comment on Arts Council's position with regards to recent government policy changes which are rolling back rights and opportunities for trans and disabled people? Some of our most marginalised colleagues in the sector, e.g. Chess Tom from Tourette's Heroes, recent statement about the removal of her access to work funding, stopping her ability to do her job, and how that can be squared with the inclusivity and relevance principles of Let's Create.
There's a couple of questions sort of tied in together there. So in terms of changes to the law, then absolutely every protective characteristic every protected characteristic should be honoured and valued. There isn't a hierarchy of those, and we, as a funder and as an employer, need to make sure that we absolutely take care of everybody with every protective characteristic. In terms of the current potential changes, I want to make sure that we have a system in place, although I don't control that system, but I would always make sure that I would always argue for having a system in place that enables artists like Jess to be able to make the work. We've got an amazing a group of disabled artists that we invest in across this country. They do some of the most innovative and challenging and dangerous work, and I think it's brilliant. We want to make sure that they are able still to come to work and do that, and we will do everything we can to advocate for that. I think somebody like Jess is a great example of an artist who we've seen go on an amazing creative journey, and I think any system that existed that meant Jess couldn't practice would be a very sad place for us to be in. Okay, and Kate's just put a couple of links in as well, or a link in to Arts Council Access Support in chat there too. Jo from Art Gene in Barrow has very politely got her hand up. And Jo, the floor is yours. Just come off mute, Jo.
Thanks, sorry, I thought I had. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, grand. So yeah, Cumbria is fantastic, but it's also quite good to get out occasionally and see other things, see what's going on. So I've been out and about at various museums who sadly, have suffered a bit since the pandemic. And I've noticed a trend where museums, to get in new audiences, seem to be embracing contemporary visual arts, which is absolutely fabulous. You get out and about much more than me. I'm just thinking about the Fitz, the Slavery Museum, where the standout pieces were contemporary visual art. Obviously, Grayson at the Wallace, dealing with quite a difficult collection that surely nobody would really want to go and see. And I just wondered if you had noticed a similar kind of embracing of that, and whether that offers some opportunities to our sector.
Yeah, I think it does, and I'd add libraries into that as well, because what you've got there is, quite democratic cultural spaces that are well positioned on high streets, if you know what I mean, and I think that there's great opportunities there, and I think often with museums and libraries, they're free to enter as well, so that there's a barrier that disappears there. And I really love it when different art forms do come together, and it's interesting actually. I was talking to somebody the other day who runs one of our smaller sort of specialist creative universities, and it's really interesting for that next generation of artists coming through is how they develop degree courses that are meaningful to them, because they kind of do a bit of everything. So they might be a sound designer, they might be working with some sort of historic museum type work, they might be doing some dance, they will almost certainly all of them be using some form of technology now, and it's really interesting. But you want to be able to create distinct degree courses, but at the same time not just have a mush of just be an artist degree course. So it's really interesting. So I think there's something there about the next generation of practitioners who will be quite interested in doing as you describe, working in different places that may have been atypical. So they may have always thought, if you're a visual artist, it's always going to only be an art gallery I've got to aim for. But actually, it's like, well, how could I do something that's in a museum? What would I do maybe working with an outdoor artist somewhere as well? And I think it's the inside buildings, outside buildings thing as well. So, and then what is the digital delivery that sits either central to it or alongside it? And I think, one of the things that is exciting are those artists and those curators who are thinking, okay, we've got some physical assets and we've got some digital assets. How do we make that work best in service? How do we work with artists to enable them to make great work that is in service of different audiences? So it's a really interesting idea, and I think you're trend spotting in a very sensible way.
Okay, thanks, Jo. Two more, and then one more for me, and then we're done, Darren. A two-pronged attack from Art Gene. So Maddie also is at Art Gene. She's in charge of Art Gene. The funding review. Maddie Nicholson, you've talked a little about this. The press are highlighting Barrow. The TV will be in Barrow. What should they be asking? What should they be asking about the funding review?
So just to clarify, in terms of the funding review, sorry, I just want to make sure I'm going to answer the right question.
I guess this is about Maddie. Come off. Do you want to come off mute and just clarify?
Yeah, so hi, Darren, and just to
Hi,
say,
Maddie.
good book, and thanks very much for highlighting both Fon here in Barrow and Archie. That's nice to see us in press there. Anyway, so funding review, the TV are coming to Barrow in mob-handed. We've been asked to go and be in the audience. We'll probably get 1 second where we have a microphone put in front of us. What do you think we should be saying and asking and promoting about Barrow? What's the ask?
I suppose the observation I've got is obviously there's going to be a lot of jobs created. There's a big program for building new houses and having loads of people who will be incoming, but also hopefully good for the people who are born and grow up in Barrow as well. And I suppose what I would observe is it's what a great opportunity to know that's going to happen to a place, and how do we have a great cultural life baked in at the start of that. So instead of being something they retrofit afterwards when they built another 6,000 houses or whatever the numbers are, how do we sit down and say, look, the narrative we're hearing is we want Barrow to be a great place where people are born, they train, they gain skills, and they then have long-term careers, and they live there and they bring their next generations of families there. How fantastic is that? What we want is a really rich cultural life for all of those individuals in Barrow and for people who come and visit. And my sense would be is if that's important for people who live in the centre of London, then it should be equally as important for people in Barrow. Why? And that question people might say, well, why Barrow? And I'd say, why not? And I think that's the argument I make. And we know that artists and creative practitioners of all sorts and great cultural organizations, some of them will be building based, some of them won't be, they change people's lives for the better. We want, this is a once in a generation, maybe once in 5 generation opportunity to take a town like Barrow and say we're going to make it the blueprint for the world. You can invent everything, let's make sure that art's at the center of it, not the peripheral. That would be what I would say.
Good luck, Maddie, with those cameras and those microphones. Final one, Darren, from the floor. This is from Virginia, who is the portfolio holder for Westmoreland and Furness for culture and other things as well. Can I press Darren to say more about Anna's question about devolution? I guess it feeds off what you've just been saying. The arts are a huge contributor to the economy and so should have an active presence at any economic development table. There's an opportunity to reframe the arts not as a passive recipient, but as a creator of growth, economic as well as soft power. I guess you'd concur with that. But I guess
absolutely.
How do you make that happen?
Absolutely, and I think we're very, very keen to work alongside leaders across the country as they carve out how that investment will work from central government, and they're working on their priorities on a region by region, city by city, town by town, county by county basis, depending on what the scale is. And absolutely. And I think what we would want to do is to be able to, and I know Virginia knows this, is to work to help build those arguments, because it's great. We've got some great people across local government and local authorities who absolutely do understand this, but not everyone does. So it's really important. We've got the data, we've got the facts, we can show different places around the country where things have worked and where investment could grow. And one of the things I think is really important is that we don't find local authorities are sort of inventing the wheel simultaneously. There's a lot of work going on, and place X can do one thing and place Y can take place X on, and then they can work together. And I think that's quite important as well. So we're really keen, as we do across Cumbria, to have those conversations and to help to be, for us, a strategic co-investor as well. And also, how I think one of the other big questions as devolution is carved out is, how do we take Arts Council investment and then and local authority investment and then leverage further investment on top of that from different sources? Some of that will be public, some of that will be private, some of that will be in education. And I think we're really curious about that. There's also some things we're interested about around how do we invest differently. So we now, after COVID, we have the Cultural Recovery Fund loan book, so we now have some of the bigger organisations across the country have loans with us. We've got our incentivising touring programme that's happening now that actually has a different sort of grant basis than we've done in the past. We're really interested in saying we've got that public money, it's a finite amount. How do we make it work as hard as possible to make the great cultural activities happen, but also potentially to find a way of taking some money, if they're profitable, back, so we can circle it back into, not for the Arts Council, but back into the sector.
Okay, I'm conscious of time, Darren. You've been doing the job for 10 years. I think it was December 2014 when you were first announced to the world as the new Chief Executive of Arts Council England. Alan Davey, your predecessor, only did 7 years. How do you keep going, and how much longer are you going to go on for?
Well, I genuinely love this job. I love having these conversations, and and I think it's nice just seeing how many people around the table I've met in real life, and I've seen their work, or I've been to their places, and I love doing it. I mean, it's energizing. I see it as a great privilege. I get to go to all parts of the country, and I've learned a lot about England in the last 10 years, I tell you that, and which is brilliant. And I get to meet amazing people who create work, but I also get to meet audiences, and that's really important as well for me. It's because we do it in service of them, and I don't know any artist or creative who wants to put on a concert that no one comes to, or write a book that no one reads, or paint a picture that no one ever sees. And I think so that connection with audiences and understanding that we're making massive changes for them in a really positive way, that's the most exciting thing for me, is when I see people. There's a thing that sometimes where we've gone to places where maybe they haven't had as much investment as they should in the past, and someone will say to me, there's something happening, and go, oh, it didn't used to be like this around here. And I think that for me is the great thing, is when I think, okay, we made a difference and in someone's life, and that's important. So I have I like it. I like my job. I love the team of people. The other thing I'd say is I'm very privileged to work with people in our 9 offices across the country who I've never worked with a group of people who have a greater shared sense of purpose, and also a greater shared sense of really, really trying to do the right thing. And there's a we have a finite amount of money, and that I think that weighs very heavily on us, and certainly on my colleagues, because they know how much good stuff is out there, and they really want to do the right thing, and to spend that money in the best possible way, and not to waste a penny of it. So it's a very uplifting job that I do. So it's not always easy, and not everybody will agree with everything that we do. And people, I'm a public servant, so I have to expect to be challenged, and that's great. That's fine. It's as it should be. And I'm always happy to have the conversation.
Okay. And Grantham being looked at this year. Fantastic. All right. Okay. Thank you very much for your time. For those of you that weren't here at the start, Darren's in Loughborough, but it's in Derbyshire, doing business in Derbyshire today. Is that right, Darren?
I am. I'm off to South Derbyshire next. Yes. Okay.
Well, it's not as nice as Cumbria, but it's not too bad. Come back to Cumbria soon. Thank you very much for your time this morning. I hope people feel that Darren's had a chance to answer some of their questions on this call. It's just good to get to know you as well, Darren, and to put that Cumbrian flag very much firmly on your radar for whenever you next come here. I think there'll be a lot of people that will be very welcoming to you to come back here again soon. So thank you for your time this morning, and thanks to everybody for your questions. Everyone else, stay on the line for a second. But Darren, if you've got to go, thanks again.
I will go, but thank you to everybody. Thank you for the work you're doing, and for the work you do that actually makes a massive difference to people's lives. And thank you for your time this morning. I know how busy everyone is, so it's always great to chat and to see you. And I will be back in Cumbria very soon. Take care of yourselves. Have a happy weekend.
All right, there goes Darren to do business in Derbyshire. Thank you to everybody for your questions. I hope that was you got a sense that we could challenge the man at the top of the tree as far as the Arts Council is concerned. Really good to put those questions into chat as well, and for those people that said a word. Kate, how was it for you?
Well, we could. I feel like I could listen to him for the rest of the day, and the way I could listen to your questions for the rest of the day as well, from the audience. But well done to you, Tom. That was very professionally done. Well judged. Thank you.
All right. I mean, it's just so I basically just wrote the Arts Council about 3 months ago and said, I see he's got a book out. Could he come on a call? So credit to him and to the Arts Council for just saying, yeah, we'll just find a time. I said it has to be a Friday, it has to be live, had to be on Zoom, blah blah blah. So if there's anybody else that you think would be good to get on one of these calls, then all ideas funnel them my way, and we'll see what we can do, because I think it's important to actually hold people's feet to the fire who've got the control of a lot of budget, and hopefully some of those questions came through.
Yeah, one thing that I would interrupt and say is that Tom does this extremely well. Really good example of not being shy and just getting in there and asking. because if you don't ask, you don't get. And I would not have had the nerve to just say, can we have Darren? But you did, Tom, so hats off for that.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Kate. So I'm not here next week. So next week, you are going to get Chris Bridgman in the chair. And next week, we're going to hear about Dave Day, which of course is a massive cultural event in Barrow, the second Dave Day. Someone tell me what date is Dave Day this year? June is it a couple of Saturdays time, something like that?
23rd, is it the 22nd?
21st.
21st, midsummer.
21st, 22nd.
21st, 22nd. So
It's
huge
grown.
events.
It's grown.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the website and talk to people, so a couple of people are going to come on to talk about that. We're going to hear about the Cumberlandia Festival, fantastic festival. Just a few tickets left now, taking place in West Cumbria between Cockermouth and Workington. Dave Cameron's going to talk to us about that, and also opportunities for workshops leading up to Cumberlandia and during Cumberlandia, and also a script writing workshop. Someone's going to talk about that as well. So Chris Bridgman will be in the chair next week, and I'll catch you in a couple of weeks' time. But thank you very much for everybody who's come along this morning. For those of you that come regularly and for those of you that come occasionally, it's just great to see you. And I hope that was an interesting hour of your time and an hour well worth spent. I think he's a decent human being, Darren Henley, and I think he tries to do the best he can in an impossible job. So I think he's okay. All right. Good to see you all. We're going to finish 2 minutes early as well. Take those 2 minutes back. Go and make a nice coffee. Catch you again soon.
Thank you, everybody.